Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Body Mass YouTube page. My name is Virginia, and as you guys know, I'm one of the owners at Body Mass Gym, and I recently had my first baby. So I kind of have documented everything from my competition prep through my pregnancy, and now I want to continue to document everything postpartum as my body adapts and changes. So those of you guys who've known me for a while know that I really am fascinated with the ability for the human body to adapt and mold and change based off of different stimulus, whether that's strength training, nutrition, lifestyle, or in this case for me, pregnancy and postpartum. At 6 days postpartum, my husband Chris and I, even though we're on paternity and maternity leave, had to go to the gym to take care of a couple things because, you know, entrepreneurship and that's life and that's what you have to do. So I decided that I wanted to do a DEXA scan when I was there. And a few reasons why I wanted to do this. Number one is I wanted to get as accurate of a reading or as close to a reading immediately postpartum as possible for what my body composition was. But also, I really am curious as to see how the process postpartum, and especially with breastfeeding, and then eventually once I do start to get back into the gym, working out and even working again, how my body adapts and changes. The biggest disclaimer I can kind of make with this video is that I am not making this as a way to say this is where your body fat percentage should be less than a week postpartum, or this is what your weight should be, or how many pounds of fat or lean mass you should or shouldn't have. It's an experiment I run on myself. Over the last several years of having done DEXAs, I've taken different supplements and see how that changes my DEXAs. I've done different styles of training. I've seen how rest affects my DEXAs. So for me, it's just another experimental tool. This is by no means saying that this is what you should be and where you should be at postpartum. Going into the DEXA scan, really, I had no idea what to expect. The most recent DEXA I had done was back in August of 2020. I competed back then, so I had done a DEXA between a local level show and a national level show back at the end of August. And at the start of 2021, I was working with a new coach, as you guys had seen in the videos. And my plan was to regularly document my DEXAs, and then I got pregnant. So obviously I wasn't doing any DEXAs for all of 2021. So a lot of what the numbers look like on the paper in terms of the graphing is related to my most recent DEXA, which was at the time of a competition, which is when I'm really lean and it's kind of not the most accurate representation of my body. But as I go through my numbers, I'll kind of explain where I am normally and kind of how these new numbers fit in and kind of theories as to what I think is happening. All right, so I'm here at Body Mass, and today is Wednesday, November 24th. So I am 6 days postpartum, and I want to do a DEXA scan just because I'm curious to see how the human body evolves postpartum. So if you guys saw on Instagram, I made a post kind of showing the first 48 hours postpartum of just kind of like side-by-side pictures of right before I went into labor, 12, 24, and then 48 hours postpartum. So I'm really curious to see kind of what happens more physiologically on a deeper level postpartum. So we were in the neighborhood today. We had to run an errand over here, so I decided to stop at Body Mass and do a DEXA. Also, disclaimer, I'm not doing this because I care about what my body fat percentage is. It's all curiosity on how the body evolves and changes. I'm not doing anything with my nutrition right now other than just eating normal and healthy for the baby, as well as like just going for short little walks just to get outside with her and the dogs. Not working out, I'm not doing anything crazy, more just curiosity from a science side of things. So here it goes.
Hold me back when I tried to move on from your life, so you stole my life with clarity. So hold me back, now you're here 'Cause I'm mad, show no fear. Wanna let you know just how it feels.
All right, so you guys just saw I went and got my DEXA. So I'm gonna go through my numbers here. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with a DEXA scan, stands for dual X-ray absorptiometry, which basically just means it's a low dosage X-ray, and what it's doing is it's determining exactly how much lean mass you have in your body, how much fat mass you have in your body, and how much bone mineral content is in your body and where it's distributed. So a few things to think about beforehand. Fat mass is your adipose tissue. That can kind of come in two forms: subcutaneous, which is surface level, which is just under your skin, as well as visceral. And that's kind of if you were to take like a steak at the grocery store and it's marbleized with fat, that's your visceral fat. And so that's why the DEXA is so valuable, is it can really give us a good read on visceral fat as well. So that's your fat mass. Bone mineral content is the weight of your skeleton. Lean mass is everything else. So a few things to keep in mind is, yes, lean mass is muscle, but lean mass is your organs, which as a woman postpartum, your organs are different. My uterus is significantly larger now than it was when I did my previous DEXA scan 1.5 years ago. Also fluid levels. So in a normal scenario, your fluid levels, your blood volume is generally consistent. Obviously, number one, being pregnant, your fluid levels are going to be significantly different, significantly higher blood volume during pregnancy, significantly higher. But postpartum, being just 6 days postpartum, is you still have a bunch of that fluid residually, but I've also started breastfeeding. And so in breastfeeding, obviously there's additional volumes of fluid. So all of that affects lean mass. So it's difficult to determine what's muscle and what's not muscle when looking at lean mass. Okay, so on my DEXA scan, if you guys can see this chart right here, this was my previous scan. The pink line shows series of scans that I've done, and that's gonna be my lean mass. And then the black line is fat mass. So at my last DEXA scan, I was at my lowest fat mass, which made sense. I had a competition, as well as my lowest lean mass. And again, that inevitably happens with competitors. When you're trying to get super lean, you'll lose a little bit of lean mass. Plus, I needed to for the bikini division. That was important for my physique to do well in bikini as I shifted to that from figure. So as you can see, since then, both my fat mass and my lean mass have shot up significantly, both of them to points higher than they've ever been. And so I definitely obviously expected that with fat mass. With lean mass, I didn't know. I didn't know how it would play in. My workouts obviously haven't been intense, and I've not been building muscle. So when I look at this, my assumption is all of that is coming from fluid retention postpartum, to be expected. As you look over here, you can see body fat percentage. And again, my body fat percentage has gone up, and it's probably about the highest it's been. But what's important to know with body fat percentage is if your pounds of fat go down, your body fat percentage will go down if your lean mass stays the same. If your lean mass goes up, even if your fat mass doesn't change, then your body fat percentage will go down. So the more lean mass you have, in my case right now, lean mass coming from fluid retention postpartum, the more lean mass you have, that will affect your body fat percentage and decrease it a little bit. So why I believe that my body fat percentage isn't super high is the fact that my lean mass is the highest it's been. And again, that's not coming from muscle. I'll tell you right now, it's not coming from muscle. It's coming from that fluid retention. But again, it's just interesting to see how those numbers play out on paper. So for reference, my norm, like where I just kind of exist with my body fat percentage, is the mid-teens. That's what's normal for me. That is not normal for most people, and that's okay. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you saw I did my resting metabolic rate test when we opened Tampa. And when I did that, my resting metabolic rate is at about 2,300 calories. So in any given day, my body tends to just burn a lot. That's just the nature of my genetics and how I am, and being a pretty active person all day long and pretty active throughout my pregnancy. So for me, since my body exists kind of in the mid-teens, that's kind of what I use as my baseline. So in my most recent scan before my competition, or kind of in between those two competitions, I was at 11.8%, which, you know, for me, that was getting a read during bikini. When I competed in figure, I'd be down like 7 or 8%. My norm is kind of mid-teens. But like, if I'm looking back on numbers in the middle of the pandemic, in May 20th, 2020, I was at 13.4. On June 29th, 2020, I was at 13.6. So again, that's kind of like my norm points for me. So 6 weeks postpartum, 6 days postpartum, my body fat percentage is at 17.6. So for me, that's the high end of norm. But the reason it's relatively low, even though my fat mass is higher, is because my lean mass is also significantly higher due to fluids. Hopefully that makes sense. If that doesn't make sense, you can ask questions down in the comments. But yeah, so that's kind of what's going on with my body. So my body fat percentage is at 17.6. My total body weight, as weighed on the DEXA, is 154.0. Obviously, you can't compare scale to scale, but my home scale the morning that I went into labor was 168.8. So again, you shouldn't compare scale to scale, but if I were, I'm down about 15 pounds in the first week postpartum, 10 of that being a baby that was 7.5 pounds and like a 2 to 3 pound placenta, as well as obviously fluid that got lost in those days. So total body weight is at 154.0. My pounds of fat is 26.1. So just for reference, before my competition, I was at 15.2 pounds of fat. My norm, if I kind of look back again in the middle of the pandemic, is 18.3 and 18.4 pounds of fat. So my body generally exists at less than 20 pounds of fat in a normal state. When I'm competing, it drops lower. And then right now I'm at 26.1, which is to be expected postpartum. My lean mass, this is what's interesting. When I competed in figure and I was getting ready to do competitions, my lean mass was in the high 120s. So it's like 127 to 129 when I was stepping on stage. In my off season, it was actually a little bit lower because I need to eat a lot to build muscle. And sometimes during my off season, I would just get a little bit tired of eating so much. But it would be around the 120s. For bikini, because I had to drop muscle mass, I had to like physically change the shape of my body. My lean mass was at 113.8, so it was about 10 to 15 pounds lower than it was for figure. 113.8 before my competition. Again, if I was to look back during the pandemic in the middle of 2020, it was about 116.4 on one scan, 118.2 on one scan. So it's kind of like the high 1-teens is where I normally exist. And so postpartum, I'm at 121.9. So almost 122 pounds of lean mass. Again, I did not just put on a bunch of muscle during pregnancy and postpartum, but lean mass includes fluids as well. So that's where that close to 122 is coming from. When I was competing in figure, that would kind of be like a normal number, but it wasn't from fluid retention, it was just from muscle. So that's kind of where my numbers are. Other things that might be interesting, Android, which is a read on your belly or your kind of visceral fat section. Again, it's easy to kind of look at your stomach postpartum and think, oh, I have a lot of fat there, but it's skin that's been stretching out for 9 months. My body took 9 months to get to that point. It's only 6 days postpartum. It's slowly getting back to norm. But in that Android region, I'm at 11.7. Again, for reference, before my competition, I was at 5.5. And normally I exist around like 7 or 8%. So obviously a little higher because there's more fat, but there's also more lean mass because I'm retaining more. So that's gonna cause the body fat percentage in that area to go down a little bit. And then my gynoid, which is my hips and butt, this is what's really interesting, at least to me. but normally I exist around mid-teens in my gynoid, my hips and butt. So I'm normally like 15%. Before my competition, I was at 12.5, so obviously a little leaner through the glutes and the butt. And now I'm at 22.8. So that's the highest my hips and butt have been. And for those of you guys who know me know that my goal has been to build a little bit of a butt. So to me, that tells me that I put on some fat around my hips and butt. Again, that's what happens during pregnancy. And I'm kind of okay with that. So that's just the summary on my DEXA scan. Again, this is just informative for me when it comes to kind of learning about the human body, my body, postpartum. This by no means should be where like standard numbers should be for women 6 days postpartum. This is what is relative to my body that I've been tracking for long extended periods of time. So hopefully you guys found this interesting. As you guys have seen in other videos, my goal is to continue to track my progress postpartum and compete in 2022. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, I'm just enjoying spending time home with the new baby. I'm going for walks that are maybe, a couple of blocks. And I'm doing shoulder mobility and thoracic spine mobility because everything is like super tight from just being so far pulled forward and heavy pulled forward. But other than that, that's all I'm doing right now. I'm eating a lot to obviously maintain my hunger levels, but also to feed my baby. And I'm excited to kind of see where this journey goes. So if you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Be sure to follow along on YouTube. So subscribe to the Body Mass YouTube channel so that way you guys can be alerted for when I update these new videos as I track my progress throughout this journey. If you guys have questions about anything at all, leave that in the comments and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.